Hey everyone, and welcome as we continue our study through the New Testament, looking at the 250 events in the life of Jesus through the Gospels. And today we're looking at Jesus comforting Mary and Martha. We looked yesterday at Lazarus becoming sick and dying, and so he's going to go to Bethany like we talked about yesterday, and he's going to comfort Mary and Martha here. And so we're going to see a different side of Jesus. And this comes from John 11 verses 17 through 37. And I'm going to go through, even though this is a lot of verses, they're shorter verses, so I'm going to go through this one pretty quickly. It says, when Jesus arrived at Bethany, starting verse 17, he was told that Lazarus was already in the grave for 4 days, which is a long time back then. Bethany was only a few miles down the road from Jerusalem, and many other people had come to console Martha and Mary in their loss. When Martha got word that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, but Mary stayed at the house. There's a assumption here that she was probably upset with him. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that God will give you whatever you ask." That took a lot of faith from Martha to say that. Jesus told her, "Your brother will rise again." And yes, she said, Martha said, "He will rise, and when everyone else rises on the last day." She was thinking, she wasn't thinking he was going to resurrect him from the dead. Jesus told her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live even after dying. Everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this, Martha?" So he gives this statement. This is a very powerful statement. "Yes, Lord," she told him, "I've always believed you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one who has come into the world from God." Then she returned to Mary. She called Mary aside from the mourners and told her, "The teacher is here and wants to see you." So Mary immediately went to him. Jesus had stayed outside the village at the place where Martha met him. When the people who were at the house consoling Mary saw her leave so hastily, they assumed she was going to Lazarus' grave to go weep, which would have been common in that day. So they followed her there. When Mary arrived and saw Jesus, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died." So again, that the kind of a little bit of a passing the blame on to him. It's like, hey, if you would have been here, this wouldn't happen. When Jesus saw her weeping and saw the other people wailing with her, a deep anger welled up within him. So it's interesting to see the emotion that there's an anger that welled up within Jesus at this point, with when he saw this, and he was deeply troubled. "Where have you put him?" he asked. And I can see this, like, you got to imagine him, the deep anger welling up inside him, and this probably wasn't a very kind. It was probably more direct, like, "Where have you put him?" And they told him, "Lord, come and see." And then verse 5, then Jesus wept. Shortest verse in the Bible. The people who were standing nearby said, "See how much he loved him." But some said, "This man healed a blind man. Could he have kept Lazarus from dying?" We'll stop there, and we'll catch up on and start in verse 38 tomorrow. But looking at the notes for this, right? 4 days was a long time for a body to have been in the ground back then. So we need to remember that, right? We need to also remember that they did not have the ability. They didn't embalm. I say they didn't have the ability to embalm people like that back then, but we know that the Egyptians did, and so before them. But I don't know. I don't know what the process was here, but they didn't embalm people in this day and age here, and so well, they just wrapped them usually in some herbs, incense, and wrappings, and put them in the ground. So Martha went to Jesus while Mary stayed. They appeared to really both be upset with him. Both of them for not coming sooner. They mentioned that if you had come sooner, then he would have been saved. And then so how do we respond, right? How do we respond when God doesn't respond in the way or the time or the way that we want him to? Right? Are we the same way? Or like, well, God, if you would have responded faster, this wouldn't happen. Or God, if you had done something about this wouldn't happen. I know in our human emotion, our human condition, we do that. I've done that, and I've questioned God all the time. And so again, I don't think there's anything wrong with questioning God, right? We got to watch our hearts and our attitudes. There's nothing wrong with questioning God, or having questions for God the way they question God. And I don't think there's sometimes anything wrong with being upset with God, or angry with situations that we're in that maybe God allows. But we've just got to be careful that we don't sin in that anger, and become sinful in those questioning the way we question God, stuff like that. I don't think there's anything wrong with questioning God and asking questions, and wondering, and going into it. We just got to be careful with how we do that. And so we know that Jesus has the power over life and death, as well as the power to forgive sins. We've seen this multiple times. And so that's because he's the creator of life. And he, when he has this conversation with him, and he says that, right? And so we know that he can store life. He tells him that. And so that was the response there. And so we have to understand that whoever believes in Christ has a spiritual life that death cannot occur or diminish in any way. That's the one wonderful thing about it. As long as we're in Christ and we believe in Him, our spiritual life doesn't die. Like we can't, our spirituality is there. And so when we realize His power and how wonderful His offer is, to really is, it's just, how can we not commit our lives to Him? I wonder that sometimes. I know there's a lot of things that get in the way. And so to those of us who believe, right, what wonderful assurance it is, right, that since He lives in us, that, or since I live, right, you also will live, right, since, because Jesus is raised from the dead, we're also have that opportunity to live forever, and that's awesome. And so John stresses that we have a God who cares, and John writes, as John writes about this, we see the emotional side when he writes about Jesus weeping and wailing, or the people, and when he saw the people weeping and wailing, he too wept openly, and then we see this anger side, and we don't know 100% reason why. Was he angry because, like, was he mad at him? I don't know if he was mad at himself. Was he just angry because everyone was upset, and and he didn't get here in time, and now everyone's crying, and he feels their emotion, or and there's a couple cases. So there's either, in either case, right? We have two things. Maybe he was emphasizing with their grief, or perhaps he was troubled at their unbelief at the same time. Maybe that's what made him angry. Either case, right? Jesus showed that He cared enough for us to weep with us and in our sorrow. I mean, he cares for these people so much that he wept and seeing this situation, knowing full well he was going into this situation. We still see the emotional side of Jesus, and this contrasts that really with the Greek concept of God in that day, which their gods had no emotions and no messy involvement with humans, right? They were emotionless. They wouldn't have been like this, like we just see here. And here we see many of Jesus's emotions: compassion, right? Sorrow, frustration, these type of things that we see from Him that make Him human. These are the things that make God human here. And it's wonderful to know that our God has these same emotions that we do. He understands what we go through when we go through such things. And so He can be there for us with this kind of stuff. And so He often expressed deep emotions, and we must never be afraid to reveal our true feelings to Him. And this is one of the things I think we get that's dangerous for us, is we get caught up in this, and well, we shouldn't show emotions. I know there's some people in Christendom, it's like, well, it should be an emotionless experience, right? You shouldn't show emotion, you shouldn't be driven by emotion, you should just be driven by, and it's like, no, I don't. Jesus was driven by emotion. He showed emotion, and there's an emotion in worshiping God. There should be an emotion. Like, if you come to God and it's like, I'm sorry, if it's like you go to a worship service and it's more of a funeral than it is a worship service. We've been talking about the last couple of weeks, the lost, right? And the angels rejoicing in heaven and stuff like that. And being with God and worshiping God should not be, a dry, emotionalist, just worship, right? Like I said, it shouldn't seem like a funeral, and or some stoic thing. And again, I'm not trying to harp on different types, or come down hard on someone's type of worship, but we see here that there was emotion in Jesus. There was lots of different emotions and things that come out, and we should have those same things, especially when worshiping and being with Jesus. And so we need to not be afraid to show our true feelings and stuff like that. He understands them because He experienced them. He's experienced every emotion that we did, truly and deeply, and He understands all of it. And so we need to make sure that we are doing the same thing, and understand that, but also showing those emotions, not trying to hold them in and do what He said here. So again, we see this side of Jesus where He connects with Mary and Martha for sure, and the people around Him. He connects with their sadness. He emphasizes with it. Excuse me. And He shows them, and we see that weeping that comes out of Him, and so we can see who Jesus truly is, and how much He cares for everyone in this situation. Tomorrow we will finish up this the message of Lazarus and him, and Jesus is going to raise him from the dead tomorrow. We're going to look at that. And we're going to see the aftermath of that as well as we continue through this study. As always, I appreciate everyone for watching and tuning in. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please go ahead and do so. We're going to continue to try to produce as many types of different teachings as we can. And as always, I appreciate everyone for watching.